Hi, and thank you for joining me today. I am DFL Chairman Ken Martin, and this is the first Chair's Corner for 2014. I cannot stress enough the importance of this year and re-electing Governor Dayton, Senator Franken, our congressional delegation, and of course, keeping the DFL majority in the Minnesota House of Representatives. From a historic investment in education to marriage equality to a fairer tax system, the DFL has made great strides in getting Minnesota back on track after 10 years of disinvestment by the Republicans. Seeing these great gains makes us realize how much Minnesota has to lose if Republicans take control again. Here today with me to talk about the 2014 legislative session is Speaker of the House, Paul Thissen. Hello, Speaker Thissen.
How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for joining us today.
I'm happy to be here.
During the 2012 campaign, there was a lot of talk about promises made, and after the 2013 session, the conversation turned to those promises that were kept. What were some of those promises that were made, and how were they kept by not only you, but other fellow DFL legislators this past session?
Yeah, well, the things we talked about in the 2012 campaign really did shape what we tried to do in 2013 and what we'll continue to try to do this year. First and foremost was investment in education, and I think we had the best education bill in a generation in 2013, from our first real investment in early childhood education ever in this state, to all-day, everyday kindergarten, to putting money into our public schools and freezing college tuitions, kind of all across the board. We made significant strides. A second thing we talked a lot about was property taxes, which, as people know, have been going up for a decade at very significant rates. And we actually just found out very good news this year, this week, recently, that property taxes are going down in the statewide, for the first time in a decade, really reversing a trend that has put a lot of families in a very hard spot with increasing property taxes. And we also talked a lot, the third thing we really talked a lot about was jobs and job creation. And we invested $100 million across the state in job creation. As people see with the economy coming back, those things are working out. And they're working out in all parts of the state. And I think that that's really important. It was a statewide effort, not leaving any part of the state behind. And so I'm really thrilled with it. And, you know, we did raise some taxes, especially on wealthy Minnesotans, and closing corporate loopholes to do it. But unlike what the Republicans claimed was going to happen, a kind of gloom and doom collapse of the economy, our economy is doing better, and better than most states in the country. So I'm really pleased with what we were able to accomplish.
You know, 40 years ago when the Minnesota Miracle came about, it really wasn't just Democrats who led that charge. It was Democrats and Republicans coming together in a bipartisan way to really make education the cornerstone of what makes this state great. And for many, many years, Republicans were a part of investing in education in this state. We saw in the last 10 years a pretty marked departure from that. What do you think, if you can sort of ascribe any sort of motive to what's going on in the Republican Party and their lack of interest in sort of funding the cornerstone of what's made Minnesota great over these years? You know, I know that Democrats, and particularly under your leadership, that's going to be the hallmark of not only this last legislative session, but moving forward, making sure that we continue to invest in education. But what do you think's going on in the Republican Party these days that they've moved away from that historic promise?
Well, I think in the past, people understood that you get what you pay for. And so kind of on both sides of the aisle, people understood that if we really want to make education key, which is the key to opportunity and has led to our success for 40 years, you're going to have to find the resources to do it. The Republican Party today is so caught up in following one single ideology, which is we can't raise taxes at all, ever, except property taxes, that they can't make the kind of investments I think, you know, most Minnesotans understand we need to make. And when I've been out across the state talking to people, acknowledging tax increases on the wealthiest Minnesotans, but that we took 80% of that money and put it into education, they get it and they support that.
That's great. You know, there's a lot of great progress made in 2013. There'll be a lot of progress made this legislative session as well. And you mentioned the fact that we have the 5th fastest growing economy in the country. and relatively low unemployment rate when you compare our state to the rest of the country. So things are relatively going relatively well in this state, but there still are a lot of people struggling to catch up in this state. A lot of disparities still. And one of the things that I was really pleased about was seeing the Women's Economic Security Act, which you and other members of the legislature put forward. Can you talk a little bit about what that is and why it's so important in this day and age that we put that act forward?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think you're absolutely right that even though the economy is growing, there are still people that are struggling, and we need to continue to grow middle class opportunity. And that's the way we got to the Women's Economic Security Act was to really look at, okay, we know that that is happening out there, and try to dig underneath a little bit. And one of the things we found out is that, and maybe we should have known this, or we kind of are raising it up now, but that really it is women who are disproportionately struggling to get into or stay in the middle class. They're a disproportionate number of people earning the minimum wage or less. And because of their caregiving responsibilities, for better or for worse, that's how things are. They tend to take on, not just for kids, but for older parents and spouses. They struggle in the workplace. So the Women's Economic Security Act is to trying to get at those obstacles, because we really believe that if we can lift women's economic opportunity up, we're going to lift everybody's economic opportunity up. So pay equity, women today earn 80 cents on the dollar for the work that men do. We're going to take steps to close that gap. We'd like to make some more investments in childcare, because we have the third highest childcare cost in the state. Raising the minimum wage is a significant part of that, and I think we're going to make good progress on that. And then focusing in on making sure that we're providing opportunities for women entrepreneurs, for women to get into higher paying jobs. It's a whole collection of things, paid sick leave, to take care of some of those care responsibilities. So it's a very comprehensive package. We worked on it with lots of people outside the Capitol. So I'm really excited with the progress I think we're going to be able to make on it this year.
And I really want to applaud you for taking this initiative on. One of my earliest memories of my mom is marching in an ERA march, actually at the state capitol, when I was probably 4 or 5 years old. And it's a sad commentary that was, 35 years ago, and we're still dealing with a lot of issues around economics for women in particular. And it's great that you brought this act forward to help address some of those disparities. So thank you. You mentioned the minimum wage, and one of the things that I think is a huge priority, not only for President Obama, but for Democrats and DFLers here in the state, is raising the minimum wage. And you touched on it briefly. Can you explain why it's so important right now during this legislative session for the DFL and other members of the legislature to help get that passed?
Yeah, I mean, it really is our top priority in the House, and we are really making very good progress on getting to a number and a meaningful minimum wage. We're aiming for $9.50. That in itself isn't probably far enough to raise everybody out of poverty that needs to be. But I mean, the bottom line is it's really two things. One is just a values issue. If you're working full time, you should be able to raise a family or take care of yourself without living in poverty. And it's as simple as that. And that's what the minimum wage is working towards. The second thing is it's good for our economy. I mean, the reality is the more money you put in people's pockets, and people that are making $9.50 an hour, they're going to be spending that money on necessities, housing, food, whatever it is. That's money going to be recirculating into our economy. And I think most economists would agree that raising the minimum wage actually has that economic boom kind of impact. And the third thing is there's all these claims about job losses, but the reality is when we raised it in the mid-90s in Minnesota, we raised it in the mid-2000s in Minnesota, job numbers actually went up, unemployment went down. So I think this is the right thing for us to do economic, but it's certainly the right thing for us to do for Minnesota values.
Absolutely. And, I think this is a huge moral issue, and it's really a statement of what kind of Minnesota we want to live in. And, Paul Wellstone used to talk about issues not being left or right, but really right or wrong. And this is one of those issues that, to me, this is about being on the right side and giving 300,000 plus Minnesotans a raise that they deserve. And so, I applaud you and the rest of the DFL members of the legislature for pushing this forward. It's going to make a big difference in the lives of Minnesotans. What's just as an aside, what's been the most fun part of your job as Speaker of the House?
Oh, I think clearly the most fun is the chance to get to meet so many different people with lots of information, interesting stories. interesting backgrounds, and learning about their lives and how their lives and the lives of Minnesotans. You really get to know this state so well. And that's been clearly the most exciting part of it.
Absolutely. Now, as a representative, a lot of people contact you day in, day out. I'm sure not only your constituents, but since you're in leadership as a Speaker of the House, you get people all over the state coming and talking to you about their issues. But to the average citizen who may or may not be watching this, how do they get involved in the legislative process and make their voice heard?
Well, the first thing I think is for people to actually do that and not feel intimidated about it. It really does make a difference, and representatives are just kind of people like everybody else, with, importantly, and this is the important point, very limited life experience compared to all the issues we have to deal with. So the fact that someone with some experience and some interest, some knowledge can communicate that to us and share it in a personal way, I think that's the other really important thing. Makes a huge difference, and is a way for us to learn and make better policy. So, contacting by email, by phone call, by letter, whatever it is, but making that contact and communication does have a huge impact on the decisions we make in Minnesota.
That's great. Lastly, 10, 15, 20 years down the road, when your legislative career and maybe your public career is over, what do you hope is going to be Paul Thiesen's legacy?
Well, I hope it's that we continue to build on the tradition we've had in Minnesota of making sure that this is a state that that creates opportunity for more and more people. And we have challenges ahead on that, and but I think we made incredible progress in 2013 to accomplish that. I would also say I think that the marriage vote last year is going to be one of those that is going to be up there and live with me for a long time.
Absolutely. Well, I thank you so much for your service to the state, to our party, and of course to all the people who have benefited from your policies so far. We really can't say thank you enough, so thank you, Paul. Thank you again to Speaker Thissen for his insights today on what to expect from the 2014 legislative session and the great things that we'll be able to talk about during the 2014 election. As always, I appreciate your support of the DFL party. If you are interested in volunteer at a local or statewide level, please visit www.dfl.org. Working with our DFL leaders, we will build a better Minnesota. Thank you.